All right, today we're going to be taking a look at the new Bean Canyon. This is a pre-production engineering sample, and this is the Gen 8 Core i7 Bean Canyon, and the H means it has a 2.5-inch drive bay. All right. Now there is a change to Bean Canyon related to the previous generation of NUCs. Bean Canyon is going to be the first of the 90-watt NUCs. So we've been seeing a 65-watt power adapter shipped with NUCs, and now we should be seeing a 90-watt because these are more powerful. Talk about the I/O on the new Bean Canyon, and I'm going to explain the differences between this and the Baby Canyon. The power button has a multicolor LED in it, so it can indicate that the power's on as well as the unit's in standby. There's the normal headset jack, so this can be a stereo headset, or you can use a splitter to a microphone and stereo speakers or headphones. The USB ports on both the front and the back are now USB 3.1 Gen 2. So these are 10 gigabit per second ports, both front and back. And you can see that that's marked because it has a little 10 right there to indicate that these are 10 gigabit per second, not the normal 5 gigabit per second. The rectangle, the LED rectangle that you saw in the previous NUCs, which indicated drive activity or that you could set as a set color, is gone to save a few dollars. Most customers didn't need this feature or want it and would have rather saved some cash, and so that's what they've done. They've gotten rid of it, and there is an activity LED right here which blinks when there's access to the M.2 SSD or the 2.5-inch SATA bay. The two small holes is for far-field dual array microphone. This is previously they were near field, but these are far field, and so there's a couple of changes with the microphones on here to support audio recognition such as Alexa. And later this year, we will be putting Alexa on one of our loads, and it'll be able to actually talk to your NUC. The changes are that these are far-field microphones, and there's a chip inside, a DSP, that is powered anytime the power cord's plugged in, even when the system's off, that hears the wake word, typically like Alexa or Google. And the wake word can be changed, and then when you say the wake word, the system would turn on if it's in standby or off, and once it comes up, then it would be able to respond to your command. The significant changes to this now is cooling. You see that there's a large mesh air inlets on both sides. This one has a Kensington lock as well as a micro SD card slot. The other side just has the screen. The cooling has been increased significantly because this is a much higher wattage processor. We're going from a 15 to 22 watt processor up to a 45 watt processor. And so you're going to see significant performance improvements, and as a result the cooling had to be increased. So the width of the cooling slots and the height has been increased, and I'll show you the blower under the lid has increased significantly. The back is pretty much the way it was on Baby Canyon. The exception is these are 10 gigabit ports as notated by the 10. It still is HDMI 2.0 for 4K at 60 Hertz, and the USB Type-C does support alternate DP mode to drive displays or Thunderbolt 3. And as mentioned, the cooling being significantly better, the blower has grown quite a bit. So you'll notice that the blower compartment is much wider and deeper than it was. There's a much larger blower under the lid here, under the top plate. You also see that the tuned antennas are a little bit longer, and so I would expect to get a little bit better range and power out of them. The chassis is 1 millimeter deeper from front to back and 2 millimeters wider left to right than the previous NUC generations. All right, I wanted to show the difference between the Bean Canyon and the Baby Canyon. Now this is a case, so it's a short case, but you can see that the blower compartment is much smaller. The processor heatsink, which sits about here, is a lot smaller. So the Bean Canyon has much more heatsink area and a much larger blower. You can see the antennas are a little bit longer. And if I align this up with the back and with the side, you can actually see there's a little bit of lip. There's 1 millimeter here, and there's about 2 millimeters here. So this shows that the Bean Canyon has much better cooling. The ventilation holes in the side versus the little slots. The much larger blower and the much larger heatsink area for the processor, and that is because the Bean Canyon's coming with a higher wattage processor, but good job Intel designing much better cooling into the Bean Canyon. All right, let's take a look at the inside of the new Bean Canyon. This is the i7 version, but the i3 and i5 typically have the exact same motherboard. The front of the chassis is at the top of your picture, and down here is the back of the system. The micro SD card slot is right here, and the Kensington lock is right here. And the Kensington lock also locks the bottom plate on. All right, so you can see we have two DDR4 sockets. Right now you can go up to 32 gigabytes of main memory. They do say that they support 64 gig, so I would assume at some point a 32 gig SODIMM will come into existence, and when it does, then you can put up to 64 gig in these systems. We have the two USB 2.0 slots right here. We have the M.2 slot. It's kind of hidden by this label, but there's your M.2 slot. This is for 42 millimeter long cards, and then that's for 80 millimeter long cards. We have our Wi-Fi module, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, this is AC radio, and it's Bluetooth 5.0, and you can see the two antennas going to those antennas I showed you under the lid. We have the microphones plugged in here. We have the SATA data cable is plugged in here, and the SATA power cable is plugged in. Let's see if I can get that out of the way. There's the SATA power cable. This connector here is for your front panel. If you're using just the motherboard and some design and need a power switch or activity LED for the SSD, you can get it from this front panel connector. And then this 4-pin connector is marked RGB LED. So most likely this is to drive a lid or perhaps other things. And so most likely where the ring on the front panel was plugged in before to give you those colors, that's probably the connector it plugged into. You can see the PIM nuts for the heatsink for the processor. There's the BIOS reset jumper. This is EMI shielding, and this gives you a nice solid ground between the top and the bottom plate. When you put the bottom plate on, that EMI shielding will short out to the bottom plate and create a good ground. And you can see that this is a plastic box with a metal shield for EMI shielding. That's the electromagnetic interference, radiation, whatever you want to call it. For FCC, you have to contain that, and so you typically do it with a metal box, and that's what that is. I do want to mention that if you're used to the wall wart style power adapter that came with previous generations of NUCs, they've switched to this laptop style adapter. This one is made by Lite-On for Intel. It comes with a short 3-foot power cord for the country. This is a C5, so you have a NEMA 15 US to a C5 3-foot cable. Then the power adapter has a C6 plug in one end, what's sometimes called the Mickey Mouse ears. And And then it has a 6-foot cord to the 5.5 by 2.5 DC tip. This is a 90-watt power adapter, where previous generations had either a 65-watt wall wart power adapter, or like the Dawson Canyon had a 65-watt laptop style, but this is now a 90-watt. All right, and then there is the standard Vesa plate and the screws that you're used to, and the Vesa plate is the same Vesa plate as previous generations of NUCs, so you're not going to see any difference in the hanging of the NUC onto your monitor. All right.